Dresden 1957 is the untold story of Ontario's worst workplace tragedy. There's never been a more important time for us to be telling Canadian stories than now. And that's one of the reasons why we're making a documentary about this lost Canadian story. I want to talk about one part of our work, and that is the creation of a three-dimensional model of the riverbank where the cave-in happened in 1957. This model will show us what happened both in the excavation and then in the cave-in, which took the lives of those men.
This doesn't look anything like it did then, but it's around here where the excavation was done and where the cave-in happened.
To create the 3D model, we flew a drone over the area. The drone then captured hundreds of photos, and with each of those photos, the exact position of the drone when it took the photos. These can then be aggregated in a computer program and turned into or transformed into a three-dimensional model, actually a point cloud. These points all reflect the contours of the ground. With this information captured, we can then create renderings that show the riverbank as it is today. We're doing this work both for research purposes and for the film itself. For example, we want to know the exact location of the foundation. The men had poured a foundation. They were almost finished with that when the pit collapsed. This foundation will still be there. It'll be buried deep underground, but we don't know the exact location of that. And partly that's symbolic, simply just knowing where it exactly happened, because this is the spot where these men lost their lives. Also, for research purposes, we want to be able to reconstruct the bank the way it looked in 1957. The top of the bank has eroded about 25 feet from where it used to be. And the shape of the bank is very different. For example, the excavation, loosened a great deal of that clay and soil, and much of that has been washed away because the river floods and has flooded significantly multiple times since 1957. So the way the ground looks today is nothing like the way it looked at the time of the excavation. Working backwards from the contours of the land today, we can compare that with topographical maps from the 1950s, for example, and the many photographs that we have. And we can do a fairly accurate recreation of what the bank looked like in 1957. We can then take that even further, actually. We can carve away what was happening as the excavation proceeded. We have very detailed information about that and many photographs as well. So we'll be able to reconstruct in this model how the excavation happened. Having a three-dimensional model that shows what the riverbank looked like and also how the excavation proceeded will allow us in the film to show the audience what's happening and make it more tangible for the audience. This was a very dangerous and very deep excavation, and there's no photos that entirely capture that, and certainly no photos that capture the full dimensions of what was happening there. But we can do that with a three-dimensional model, and that's why we're building this. This is just one example that gives you an idea of the scope of work involved both in the research to create this documentary and then, of course, to create the content for the film itself. We're making this project from scratch. There have been no books, there have been no previous films about it. We're finding all primary sources and reconstructing the event so that we can tell this story at last in a film.